Try not to. I might.
Oh, you might. What? Oh, you might cry. Okay.
Yeah, I might. Yeah.
That's you were just like, I might, and then like you froze.
Yeah,
I
thought that sentence was continuing.
Nope.
He was a piece of shit, though.
What?
I was quoting. I think you should leave. I was a piece of shit, though.
Get it all out before we start recording.
Oh no,
just let it all. Just let.
Let me see how I can like relate it. I can find a way. I'll find a way. It'll be fine. It'll be good.
No, not in the second part. Don't relate it in the second part at all. That is not a good idea.
I don't think
like, I don't. You're like, I don't want to be here anymore. And he's like alive. Yeah, that's not a good.
So what's the joke?
That's not good. That would be so bad. Let's
I won't do that.
No joking allowed in the second part.
We'll be very serious.
Only tears.
Brave of the Fireflies. It's a movie. It's an animated movie. Oh, all right. We'll go Andrew and then Jessica for the order because women are last.
Wow.
So dumb. Oh my gosh.
Cancel.
All right.
Women are last, but you know what they be doing? Eating good.
So dumb. Oh,
I can't be on podcast with Jessica. I'm sorry.
No, I like how you're both drinking because you're like, I need this. I need this to get through this.
I'm only talking about very sad movies. So.
Yeah.
I mean, Spencer's only so sad. They get KFC at the end. It can't be awful.
Yeah, that does happen.
Oh, what the heck? Spoilers.
Yeah. The history is that they got McDonald's.
Sorry.
It's a real thing that happened, but they got McDonald's.
I mean, I have a lot to say about the royal family, but getting KFC, like, was there not a Popeyes around? Like, shit, Diane, I have taste.
There probably actually wasn't a Popeyes around.
Yeah, Popeyes probably didn't even exist then.
That's not.
I feel like that's an American exclusive thing, but
or Zaxby's.
Definitely didn't exist.
We
could just do a segment on like
all the chicken that should have got.
Yeah, the best chicken restaurants.
They're like, excuse me, can I get a salad?
Yeah, my marriage is ending, but can I get a salad with some toast? Oh my god.
I'm not gonna make it.
All right, here we go. Let's do it. And 3, 2, 1. And welcome to episode 377 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I'm here with
Andrew Swafford
and Jessica Carr.
In today's episode, we'll be talking about movies that we saw this week in part 1. And in part 2, we will be getting depressed and watching 1988's Grave of the Fireflies, which was part of our Patreon Picks series and was suggested to us by Tyler, who just had a child, and I'm deeply concerned for his mental health.
I like that we are pivoting from Shrek Retold to Grave of the Fireflies.
Oh, good Lord.
Yeah.
It's a pivot. Really pivoting from the Shrek franchise to a selection of anti-war movies is interesting. And that's what you get with the Cinematary podcast. We don't just go for the easy layups. We got a lot of people listening to our Shrek series. It was real good. And then we were like, you know what we could hit them with? Boom, anti-war. We're going to be shitting on America in this episode. It's going to be a hoot. But before you report us to the FBI, head over to cinematary.com. You can we got the whole Shrek series that you can listen to if you missed any of those episodes and you were just like, I need something to soothe my soul after this episode. And then we got Andrew's review of Labyrinth of Cinema, which he talked a little bit about last week. And then we also will have, if you listen to this after Friday, on Monday or Tuesday or whenever I get it completely finished, we'll have a review of The French Dispatch. So
let's say Monday.
Let's hope.
For Andrew's sanity, let's say Monday.
For Zach's sanity too.
Yeah, I guess that's also important.
It didn't seem that important, but yes. All right, let's go ahead and let's talk about. We'll jump into some new releases.
Yeah.
Let's start it with friend of the pod, Kristen Stewart.
Yeah.
And Spencer. So Spencer is the new Pablo Larraín film. This one, for those who are unfamiliar with Pablo Larraín, he did Jackie.
Mm-hmm.
He did Neruda.
Mm-hmm.
He did No.
He put a movie out last year called Emma that I did not see.
Yep. So
heard it was good.
But he's like on this. I think he said he's making a trilogy of like these kind of tragic figures of history.
So I heard that was a thing that was proposed in an interview. It was some film critic who was interviewing him, and she said that she thinks it would have been great for him to follow up Jackie and Spencer with a movie about Britney Spears, in relation to the whole, the legal issues that she's been embroiled in the last year or so, or many years, I suppose. And I think he kind of laughed it off in the interview, but then after the interview was over, he kind of pulled her aside and was like, "So would you actually like to see me make a movie about Britney Spears?" So that would be cool if that happened.
That's a great idea. But regardless, Spencer is about a weekend in the early 90s. It follows Princess Diana, who's played by Kristen Stewart, who at this point has been in the royal family for about a decade, and is kind of on the seems like she's hitting a wall with old Prince Charlie in his in that marriage, and also just the whole royal shit in general,
Yeah.
Which
it ain't great.
Which is fair. Yeah. Andrew, what did you make of this? Or I guess were you I can't remember. I remember we talked about it on the podcast, but did you like Jackie?
I really liked Jackie. Yeah. It was a movie that I kind of felt like I was sort of walking around in for a couple of days afterwards. Like it just had such a precise, strong tone to it. Like I think Pablo Larraín in that movie, and also in this movie, Spencer, does such a great job at working with his composers and his cinematographers to create an awesome sense of atmosphere. In that movie, the composer was Mika Levy of Under the Skin and Zola fame. And in this movie, the composer is Johnny Greenwood of Radiohead. And I think that in both cases, like all of that stuff kind of works together to kind of put the viewer in this kind of hypnotic state that sort of resonates and stays with you.
Oh, Pablo Larraín definitely watched and dug Phantom Thread. So.
Oh yeah, I could definitely see a Phantom Thread connection.
Well, Johnny
while we're throwing out other connections, the cinematography at times reminded me of Carol. That kind of like soft pastel, like kind of blown out, like highly textured, celluloid grain. Feels like an old photograph or something. Yeah. And it also at times reminded me of Ingmar Bergman's Fanny and Alexander, in the way that it captured these like really ornate interior spaces in ways that feel almost kind of mystical. But I loved this movie, and this is going to be one of my favorite movies of the year. And I know I liked it maybe a little bit more than you did, Zach. So I'm curious to hear kind of where we diverge on it.
I think I have the consensus detraction with it. I
do have a detraction, so I might agree with you.
Okay. I'm preface that I like this movie. I loved the cinematography and the score, like you talked about. Those were great. I loved Kristen Stewart. I thought she was great.
Yes, she's extremely
fantastic.
good in this movie. Yeah.
I just the script is all it's just all text. It's no.
I think that it's mostly fine, but I actually really like the kind of framing of it, like the arc of the story. But I think
the framing's fine, but it's a lot of like it's all like her telling us like this is what I'm dealing with at this moment, and you're just
Mhm.
the thing that I was thinking about Jackie, what I loved as well about Jackie was also that whole movie. It's not really explicitly like that JFK gets killed and then that
Yeah.
Lyndon B. Johnson takes over, and all that stuff's happening. But the
Mhm.
core, what's really great about that movie is it's all like the subtext, it's all the underneath, it's all Natalie Portman kind of conveying this
Yeah.
anxiety and this distress through her face, which Kristen Stewart also is able to do in this movie. But at the same time, you have Stephen Knight, the screenwriter, who's just like putting like banners on Princess Diana's unhappy.
Yeah.
Princess Diana's unhappy with the royal family. Princess Diana, and you're just like, God damn, dude! Like, let the fucking movie breathe.
Right. I
That was my
agree.
issue.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
There are just like too many lines of dialogue between characters where they're kind of like being way too explicit about the mental health struggles that probably would have gone more unspoken, and also like saying things that are metaphorical and symbolic in
yeah,
ways that people don't actually speak out loud.
yeah.
It's interesting. I'm looking up the filmography of this screenwriter as well as the filmography of the screenwriter of Jackie, and you would not guess that Jackie is the more subtle movie because it is written by the guy who wrote Maze Runner and Allegiant. Whereas the guy who wrote Spencer wrote Locke and Brandon Cronenberg's Eastern Promises and Allied and stuff like that.
I don't know what happened here.
I think I agree for sure that like there are missteps in the script of this movie, but like ultimately the strengths of it kind of carried me through those things, and it kind of like elevated past any like particular nitpicks that I might have with specific lines or anything like that.
Well, and it wasn't like nitpicks. It was just the thing that I agree with your thing on Jackie. Like that movie stuck with me because it just felt like this kind of walking nightmare. Like the moment
Yeah.
he's killed, like they went from being on like literally the top of the world to they're just some other rich, whatever family in America. Like they completely lost all, she lost all of that, just all of what came with the White House and the prestige and all that stuff. It
Right.
just all went away. And she's like able to convey just like that, meteoric fall from literally the second that bullet hits his face to, like she's able to convey that. And that's so fucking compelling throughout that whole movie. And in this one, it's just Kristen Stewart is able to convey all of this kind of stuff that is compelling as well. But the script just gets in the way. And you have like scenes with her and Timothy, mainly it's with Timothy Spall, where Timothy Spall's good too, but they're like sitting there like just it's just very it's kind of like it feels like a play or a book where they're having to convey all of this stuff through
Verbally.
words. And you're like, no, this is the fucking movie. The one thing I wanted to ask you about this as well, did the Anne Boleyn thing work for you?
Yes, it really did. And to kind of connect back to what you were saying about Jackie and like the feeling of it being kind of like a waking nightmare, like the main feeling that this kind of evokes is a feeling of doom. I saw a Letterboxd review from somebody who said like Kristen Stewart plays Princess Diana as somebody who's like already dead. Like she's kind of walking around in full knowledge of like there's a line early on where she says, will they kill me, do you think? And she's of course like speaking hyperbolically, but there's that like very pointed double meaning. And it just seems like there is this palpable sense that like this position of privilege that she's found herself in is like crushing her. And they kind of do this like magical realist stuff that with the Anne Boleyn character, like she's reading about Anne Boleyn, and there are moments where like she sees Anne Boleyn in places where she obviously isn't, and that all evokes Fanny and Alexander for me in the way that like there's these characters are kind of like connected to this like larger cosmology, just due to like the position that they have in society, if that makes any sense.
I felt like it was Princess Diana's personal shopper,
Yeah, a little bit.
Hanging out with ghosts, but she might as well just started texting Anne Boleyn.
Oh, while we're talking about Anne Boleyn, this
As
is
you
not
do.
really a spoiler, but she does show up in the climactic scene of the movie, and no, not that earlier.
Yeah,
the last
take your
time
order, I'm Anne
you see
Boleyn.
Anne Boleyn, and that scene kind of seamlessly transitions into this beautiful montage sequence in which is mostly consists of Kristen Stewart dancing that like doesn't take place in any sort of actual literal reality, but that was one of the moments where like I felt the movie kind of like transcending any gripes I had about it. Like there was that sequence, and then there's a scene, a dialogue scene between Kristen Stewart and Sally Hawkins immediately afterwards that I just was like so swept up by that I guess it was that thing where like you end your movie on a really high note and you leave your audience feeling satisfied. And I was definitely like I left like not being able to be mad about any of the negative stuff.
Yeah. I was just more annoyed because Kristen Stewart was so good in this movie, and I was just kind of like, Stephen Knight, get the fuck out of the way.
Yeah.
That was mainly I was just like, get the hell out of the way, man.
Mm-hmm.
Over there making us talk and shit, like whatever. It was a nice, if you're watching too much of The Crown or whatever the hell else people are watching, watch Spencer. It's a nice, it's a nice fuck you to the royal crown.
For sure. Abolish the monarchy.
So it's in theaters now, but what is also in theaters now, but is being dethroned by the war criminal movie that Marvel made. It's Dune.
Oh man, did Eternals really take the top spot?
Yeah, it did fine.
Man, I thought that I heard that it was
people
doing
be
horribly.
loving some. Did you? I don't want to get on a whole other tangent, but I also heard that one of the other Eternals, like mind controls indigenous people. So I almost want. I kind of want to see this movie because this seems like just a minefield of like just stupidity.
It is also like 3 hours, right?
Yeah, I don't want to do that.
Mm-mm.
I mean, I love Tony Leung, and I couldn't even bring myself to watch the Shang-Chi movie.
No,
because I was
like, that was pretty good. Shang-Chi was actually pretty good.
He's throwing rings. Like, what is he, Sonic the Hedgehog? Come on.
Well, it was still pretty good.
You know what?
Tony Leung looked amazing. He
always does.
I know, but he like looked so good in Shang-Chi.
He's a pretty man.
Yeah,
he looked amazing. Pretty man. Anyway, Dune. Speaking of pretty men.
Anyway, Dune. So, there's this guy named Paul. I'm just kidding. But yeah, it's weird because
we talked about it a couple weeks ago. You don't think of the plot.
I know, yeah. Yeah, obviously. I wasn't going to sit here and be like, well, it all started
from this house.
Let's talk about spice.
When the Mahdi was born into the world. I wasn't going to say that. But yeah, so my first experience with Dune is like my dad loves sci-fi movies and would always watch the Sci-Fi Channel. And my experience with Dune is like the old David Lynch movies that like played, and Kyle MacLachlan had like blue, like so artificially blue eyes, and I would just like walk in the living room and my dad would just be watching it, and I was like, what even is this? Like, what is even happening? And he's like, it's the spice. They're trying to get the spice. And I was
spice, like, Jessica.
They're trying to get the spice.
And just like, as a child, I just sat there and watched it and saw the sandworm and all that stuff. And I was like, this is dumb. I was this is like really stupid.
Have you watched it as an adult?
No, I have not.
I watched it a couple of years ago when I was like filling in my last gaps in the David Lynch filmography. And it is tremendously bad. It's like one of the worst movies I've ever seen. There are people trying to like critically reevaluate the David Lynch Dune now because like it's back in the conversation. And like fucking stop that. Like, that movie's not good. David Lynch took his name off of it because he knows it's not good.
Wah.
Like, it's just, there's nothing to recommend it.
And I think the interesting part of that is that lots of comparisons are being made with the new Dune movie and Lord of the Rings. And like Lord of the Rings was also a book that was like trying to be adapted, but like the adaptation that came out like originally was like not good at all. And then Peter Jackson got a hold of it and it became like this whole big thing. And then once it got started again, then people started getting into it and it started getting revisited, which I think, I'm sure that if you looked at like Dune book sales, that they just like skyrocketed.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. And I'm not really a science fiction person, I don't think. I grew up watching tons of science fiction stuff just because my dad loved it and I loved movies. And so I was like, well, this is part of our like bonding thing together. But I really, really loved Dune. I really love this movie. And I went into it like thinking that I was going to hate it because there's nothing like that Denis Villeneuve has made on a large scale with a lot of money that I've really enjoyed watching. Like, I didn't like Blade Runner 2049. I thought it was super boring and very cold. And I wondered if that was his like style transitioning into something where he has more money and it's already established. But I think that he did a really good job with this one, and it could be just all of the other people that worked with him on it, but it has a sort of like sense of humor and all of the characters are very realized, and I think that that's something that Blade Runner 2049 didn't have at all. Like, it was like they were like shells of people just walking around, and I think that the characters in Dune aren't like that at all. Like, they're all extremely compelling, and even Jason Momoa's character, who is like the big warrior man, you know, beats on his chest, does the knife on the forehead
yet is clean shaven for most of this movie. Which is weird to see. And
his name's just Duncan Idaho because, you know,
Duncan.
in the world of all of these like crazy people, you got to have someone named Duncan and someone
all the
named
people
Paul.
in House Atreides have like super American names, like Paul, Duncan Idaho. There are other examples that have left my brain since watching the movie, but it was a thing that I noticed about all of them. And I think that you know, the movie is making a larger allegory about like various countries, you know, endeavors in the Middle East for oil. And I think that like Timothée Chalamet's family is like America. Duncan, Idaho makes sense to me.
Right. And yeah, and I think that they are building up like a really good story with that. I was worried that Paul, like, becoming one of the Fremen was going to turn into like a Dances with Wolves situation. Like, he is the colonizer. He is spending time with the people he's trying to colonize. And I was like, you know, kind of worried about that. But Cam, who actually knows a whole lot about the book series, was like, you gotta give it time and give the story time to kind of put him on his ass a little bit and to
they're
show
seeding enough stuff to let you know they're going to subvert that later, I think.
Yeah, which is great. And I really love that in Dune, in the story itself, like, the women are so powerful. Like, they're given a lot of stuff to do, and like, specifically, it's very funny that one of the most powerful witches, she is part of the Bene Gesserit, and she has so much control over her body that she can control the gender of her baby, and her name is just Jessica. Like,
oh my god, have you gone to Jessica? She can totally bend your child.
Which is so cool. But she has so much, like, whenever Paul and his mom get kidnapped, like, she has the power of being able to tell people what to do, and once she finds the right pitch, and the way that they did that was amazing. Like, I didn't think that it was corny or anything, and it sounded so cool. But it's like, his mom is such a badass. Like, she is with him at the end of the movie, and they're with the Fremen, and she proves herself that she can, you know, live in the desert with them. And by the end of the movie, I was like, where's the second movie? Like, I was like so pumped for it, and I really did not think that I would feel that way at all.
Yeah.
And it's cool to me that we have this thing now that is, I mean, I'm sure that they're going to make 2 or 3 more movies, but it's nice to have something to look forward to like that. Like, and for people to be able to talk about it. And it, like, we sat around a table after we watched it with a bunch of our friends, and everyone, and these are all people who haven't read the books, obviously, everyone's just like giving all of their theories, like, this is what we think is going to happen, this is how we think the story is going to progress. And then people like Cam, who already know what's going to happen, we tell them, be quiet, please do not speak. and I'm like, not looking up anything about it, not reading anything about it, because I want it to kind of play the way that it's going to, and I'm just like really excited about it.
Yeah, I had a similar experience. I did not know. I didn't think I was going to like it at all. In fact, like when Zach and I were still planning on going to TIFF together and seeing this movie at TIFF, we were kind of talking about it as like this chore that we were both going to do so that the site would get clicks. You know, like, well, one of us has got to see Dune, and like, well, I guess I'll go with you just for moral support. Who's going to
be doing it? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. But we thought it was going to be this like 3-hour long slog of self-seriousness, which I agree with Jessica. Blade Runner 2049 is absolutely that. I really
so many listeners right there.
I love one of Villeneuve's early movies, Enemy. I think that is a great movie. I think that he has not quite hit the heights of that movie since. That's kind of an unpopular opinion, I guess. But I was surprised by how much I liked this. I was also expecting it to be kind of impenetrable based on how difficult to read I've heard the book is. Like it's one of those books that people say is unfilmable. And that's one of the reasons why David Lynch's movie is like so bad, is like he doesn't really do much work to make it accessible for an audience. I heard there was actually when the movie came out in 1984, when you bought a ticket to it, you were handed a glossary of terms that could help you decode the things that were going on. But I think that this movie, it is really smart about how it doles out information. It kind of gives you just enough information to understand the next scene. And then in that scene gives you enough information to understand the next scene. And like eventually it kind of becomes like this larger tapestry of how this world and society and hierarchy works. And yeah, I thought it was good. The only complaint I have about it is that it does get a bit droning in parts. It's doing the the kind of monochrome one perfect shot cinematography with these like big drony choral score, which is like really cool, and it is a vibe. It does create a mood, but at 3 hours, I think there are times when that gets a little tedious for me. But I think that a lot of that comes down to personal taste. Like I'm generally not somebody who like is really excited about sitting down and watching the extended editions of Lord of the Rings, for example. Like those big, loud, epic movies are generally don't excite me all that much. They can feel like work. And this mostly didn't feel like work. Like I mostly was, very, excited by all the cool, like world building sci-fi stuff. That it kind of like shows that, just like how much Disney has been fucking up with like Star Wars and Marvel and stuff like that, because you have so much cool stuff to play around with, and like they always make it feel so like weightless and lifeless and like uninteresting. But there's like a certain amount of like, I don't know, just like I don't know, weight and realism to the way that the sci-fi stuff operates in this movie, that really makes me like buy into it and get engrossed. So yeah, I would also, you know, add to the choir of people saying this is a good blockbuster and you should go see it if you haven't.
Oh yeah, it's the Dune agenda. Welcome to the Dune agenda.
Yeah.
You're on our team now.
Can we get Jessica to explain what a movie discussion sounds like again? And then afterwards, we all get in a circle and we talk about how pumped up about them. Like, yeah, that's how movie discussions go, Jessica.
Whatever.
Maybe you've heard of it.
I was just painting the pictures. Pictures for the listener.
Don't paint the picture. Be the DJ guy and just be like. I saw this TikTok that they were like, speaking of the mom character, they were like, this is Paul telling his mom that he wants McDonald's, and it was like this black cat, and it was like going. And I was like,
and so that's the other thing, like coming off of the Shrek series where we're like, oh, so many Shrek memes. There's so many Dune memes. Like people have taken it and just been like,
speaking of
I'm gonna
which,
put all these Dune
I didn't get any credit for my great Dune meme that I made for Cinematary.
Oh, what are you doing in my swamp? You didn't make that.
No. The Chalamet, the Timothy Chalamet Zendaya one, where it's like she's in the back and she's like, and then he's up and he's like,
oh yeah.
And I was like, you know, we're doing Shrek movies, and so we're like Shrek movies, and then it's like,
oh, that's right.
Yeah, I liked it on Twitter. I gave you that much credit.
Andrew said you didn't come up with what are you doing in my swamp.
I didn't. That was great.
Wasn't you? He was like, that wasn't you.
You ain't swamp boy. I'm just saying, I wanted credit for it. I thought it was good. I thought
everyone go like this tweet retroactively.
Yes, please. It's for me.
Nobody will do it. We'll go check and they'll be like,
they'll get negative. Like, why are there -5? So Dune, it's in theaters. Go check it out. It is worth going to see like on a big screen if you're going to see it at all. Don't watch it on HBO Max.
No.
Real quickly before we head into the break, I want to talk a little bit about The Swimmer, which is now available on Criterion Channel.
Great movie.
Great movie. It's directed by Frank Perry. It stars Burt Lancaster. I can describe it. It doesn't make any fucking sense if you describe it. Pretty much the plot of The Swimmer in like a very vague log-liney way is it follows this guy, Ned Merrill, who's the Burt Lancaster character, and he's visiting a friend, and he's just like, holy shit, you got a nice pool right here. And so he's like jumping in the pool. He's talking to people about how they used to swim. He's very obsessed with just like swimming. And then he like, he like looks over the valley and is like, man, there's a lot of pools in this. There's a lot of pools in this county. There's a lot of pools.
I thought for sure he was going to be swimming on a river or something at some point, but no, he just runs from swimming pool to swimming pool, miles between each swimming
like
pool.
Through the woods. Like is sprinting through woods and then pops up like in somebody's backyard. It's like, yo, can I use your pool? Which does not sell this movie at all to anybody. But it's just a really tight little psychological thriller. I think Ned Merrill is like a nice kind of a nice prototype for a character like a Don Draper. Who would come kind of later as like this kind of fading American masculine ideal. Because as he goes, this isn't super spoilery, but as he goes to the different pools, he starts to kind of like enter these spaces where it kind of taps into his romantic failures and his economic failures and his career failures and stuff like that. And so he's kind of he's losing a little momentum in the whole, going to all the different pools quest. But I really liked it because Burt Lancaster, he's so weird in this movie. He's so weird in this movie because he just has like this kind of you can tell something's off. One, because he's sitting there talking about pools so much, like nobody's ever talked about pools that much, and two, like he just kind of like you feel at least at the beginning you just feel like he's in a completely different like world. Like you almost think that he's like he like escaped from like an institution because
Yeah.
he just seems like he's there's a couple things loose up there.
He has a
He,
manic energy about him.
he does, and
Yeah.
and you can tell that he's like talking about like his family and his kids and stuff as if like clearly something's happened so that they're in a completely different place than where he thinks they're at. He keeps going, oh, they're up at the house, the girls are playing tennis, and you're just like, I don't, what are you talking about, man? And I don't know, I really dug this movie. I was reading I was looking at it seems like on Letterboxd like pretty well liked. I saw this one guy though on I think it was the Criterion Collection's Instagram, and they had like shared a picture because one of the things that you run into is he runs into his old babysitter and is naturally very creepy with her because she used to watch his kids, but they has this amazing like kind of crossfade.
Oh, you're talking about the crossfades that people were putting up against the Virgin Suicides
Yeah.
crossfades. Yeah.
But it has this amazing crossfade like sequence in like that happens
Mhm.
while they're like running through the woods to the different pools. But there's this guy who was like commenting on it, and he was like, "The Swimmer." He's like, "The Swimmer, 1968 is the worst movie I've ever seen," and he's just
What?
like, and he's like commenting on everybody who's going, "Oh, I like that movie." He's like, "It's not, it's bad." I was like, I want to talk to this guy.
I regret to inform you, it is bad.
Yeah.
Sorry
Dang.
you liked it.
But
Reconsider
Andrew,
this.
I know you've seen this one as well. What do you make of The Swimmer?
It's been a while. It's probably been like 2 years or so since I've seen The Swimmer, but I really liked it. It has a great sense of like deeply American tragedy to it. Like we can't spoil the last scene of this movie. It is a great twist, but it's the kind of twist that like William Faulkner would write or something like that. And like Zach said, it's just so profoundly strange. What year did this come out? Was it a 50s movie or 60s movie?
No, it's 68. Like the fact
68.
that this came out like in theaters, like this
Right.
is a weird fucking movie to come
Yeah,
out.
I mean, think about like, The Graduate is one of the movies that came out around that time that was like pushing the Hays Code and like past its boundaries. This is way weirder than The Graduate, like by a long shot.
And I wonder if that's why. Like, I feel like it should get. I mean, honestly, I think it should get talked about like in those kind of like probing because especially like as this like out of the Eisenhower era, just before the Reagan era of like nuclear family, American family, like ideal, like this completely, it's honestly like, even though it's pre-Reagan, it's like probing into that like Reagan era. This is what an American family should be, because that's why it like Burt Lancaster just the whole time, like it's such a good movie star performance because you kind of like him just because it's Burt Lancaster and you're like, I like Burt Lancaster.
Right.
But also you can't like this guy because he's just the worst.
It's playing with that star persona too.
Yeah.
Of like the idea that he's charming, but maybe like not charming enough to cover up like how much like time has like damaged him. It's really interesting.
No, I if you have Criterion or you want to go to the library, I recommend watching The Swimmer. It's a super strange, really interesting movie, and it will most definitely be on my Young Critics ballot next year.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. So, The Swimmer, 1968, be going pool to pool. I was deeply entertained by that, like where he was just like, I'm just gonna run, because I can't emphasize enough that he does not like he's literally running barefoot in a bathing suit through the woods.
Aren't there a bunch of like shots of people looking dead into the camera? I feel like I remember that in the opening stretch of this movie, like as he was maybe I'm misremembering, but I feel like as he's kind of like propping himself up on the sides of pools and talking to people, like it's a lot of people just like looking right down the barrel of the camera at you, and it's very odd.
A little bit, yeah. There's a couple of those, and then like you have a lot of those because you have this whole thing with the babysitter character that also is
Creepy.
It's a strange movie.
Yeah,
it's really good though. So cool. Well, let's take a quick break, and then we will be back with no jokes. We got all our jokes out in part 1 to talk about Grave of the Fireflies, which is a very serious movie. After this.
No jokes.
no jokes.
No more jokes.
Only sadness.
Only sad.
It's going to be the adult tour. We can say whatever the hell we want.
Like hell.
Oh my gosh.
Like horse. Like cum.
Wow.
Cum shot. That's for Jessica.
Oh, stop.
Really going for it.
Jessica, you know the one that I've been watching a bunch lately is the one when he's talking about the baby not being able to tell that people can change because the baby can tell that the baby starts crying because it can tell that he used to be a piece of shit. And then he's like, Meredith, I was just wondering, do you think that the baby knows that people can change? They're doing the sloppy steaks. They're pouring the water on the steaks.
Oh my gosh. You know,
going everywhere.
For Halloween, our friend Kev wore the fedora with the safari flap.
Did he? Oh my god.
He did. Made it. He made
Don't
his hat.
do the voice.
And he had dice in his pocket.
I wanted to go to a Halloween party because I wanted to dress up as either that or Carl Havoc.
Yep. There was also a girl.
I wanted to say that that's what I was going to tell you. I forgot to make a Carl Havoc joke last week during Shrek the Musical and just be like, "There's too much shit on me," but
oh my gosh.
I forgot.
Yeah, that's a way better time to make that joke.
I know, right?
Yeah, that would have been fine.
Would have been good.
No jokes in the second part. We have to get it all out. Only sad. Like an hour ago to prepare for this episode. Not an hour ago because we've been on it for an hour.
Yep.
Like an hour and 5 minutes ago. I was like watching a TikTok of a baby duckling and I cried instantly. I was like, this is not good. I was testing to see how likely it would be for me to cry during this episode, and it was
easily. It turns out
the duckling was sleeping, and it was like the light was like shining on it, and it was sleeping. It was so sweet. Jeez. I can't. I don't know. It's bad. It's gonna be sad. People on Letterboxd just like commenting, and it was like talking about the Fireflies. I was like, why are they doing this? Everyone, like this one that was like, where's the quote? It was like, she never woke up again. It was like, why did you put that on there? Why must fireflies die so young?
He like is dramatic about that too, because he has that whole scene with her, and then it's just like it like kind of like fades out, and just like, and she never woke up again. I was like, oh my god, shit, fire! It's just like up the end, and I was like,
oh yeah, I was already sobbing by that point. So
yeah.
Like, I was like, okay.
Well, let's get into it. Let's get it over with.
Say, yeah, good idea.
Sadness, imperialism. Okay.
No. All right.
We have to be careful. We can't sympathize with the Japanese too much because
they did some fucked up shit.
That angers. Well, yeah, but also it angers Republican lawmakers.
I mean, yeah. Nobody during.
No, there's no winners in this.
No, yeah, I was gonna say, like, during a war, everyone does.
There's two losers: United States, Japan. Side note: last laugh. In the movie Minions,
No.
2015, the Minions are said to like be a part of like all like the most evil people's plans through history, but they just don't talk about like 1930 to 1950.
Yeah,
So,
obviously.
did the Minions work for Hitler? Because
All right, let's not.
I don't want to know.
I don't want to.
I don't want to open that box.
Minions
No.
2.
All right, well, let's hit.
Isn't there already a Minions 2?
Yeah, Hitler's Minions.
Hitler's Minions.
No.
Okay.
I went on a rabbit hole about that too. There's like all these like in-depth, like deep dive theories about the Minions being Nazis. That was really entertaining. Between that and the Cars, the planes movie insinuating that there was a Holocaust.
No.
I love both of those theories. Like, why? Anyway, all right, let's talk about this. I'm sorry.
We need to get through this.
We gotta do it.
It'll be fine. There we go.
Okay.
In 3, 2, 1. And we're back with part 2 of episode 377 of Cinematary. See that you didn't make me sing that going in. This is
not a sing-songy type of movie. So.
In this part, we're going to be doing our Patreon pick series. This pick comes from our patron Tyler Chandler, and it is 1988's Grave of the Fireflies.
Thanks, Tyler.
Yeah, again, very concerned for your mental health at the moment, Tyler. You just had a child. Anyway, written and directed by Isao Takahata and based on a short story of the same name by Akayuki Nosaka. The film stars Tsutomu Satsumi, Ayano Shirashi, and Yoshiko Shinohara. A devastating meditation on the human cost of war. This animated tale follows Saita, a teenager charged with the care of his younger sister Setsuko after an American firebombing during World War II, which separates the two children from their parents. Their tale of survival is as heartbreaking as it is as is true to life. These siblings rely completely on each other and struggle against all odds to stay together and stay alive. Grave of the Fireflies author Akayuki Nosaka said that many offers had been made to make a live-action film adaptation of his short story, but he argued that, quote, it was impossible to create the barren, scorched earth that's to be the backdrop of the story. He also argued that contemporary children would not be able to convincingly play the characters. Nosaka expressed surprise when an animated version was offered. After seeing the storyboards, he concluded that it was not possible for such a story to have been made in any method other than animation, and expressed surprise in how accurately the rice paddies and townscape were depicted. Takahata said that he was compelled to film the short story after seeing how the main character, Seda, quote, was a unique wartime ninth grader. Takahata explained that any wartime story, whether animated or not animated, quote, tends to be moving and tear-jerking, and that young people develop an inferiority complex where they perceive people in wartime eras as being more noble and more able than they are, and therefore the audience believes that the story has nothing to do with them. Takahata argued that he wanted to dispel this mindset. When Nosaka asked if the film characters were, quote, having fun, Takahata answered that he clearly depicted the kids having had substantial days and that they were enjoying their days. Takahata said that Setsuko was even more difficult to animate than Seita, and that he had never depicted a girl younger than 5. Takahata said that, quote, in that respect, when you make the book into a movie, Setsuko becomes a tangible person, and that 4-year-olds often become more assertive and more self-centered and try to get their own ways during that age. He explained that while one could, quote, have a scene where Seda can't stand that anymore, it is difficult to incorporate that into a story. Takahata explained that the film is from Seda's point of view, quote, and even objective passages are filtered through his feelings. Most of the illustration outlines in the film are in brown instead of the customary black. Black outlines were only used when it was absolutely necessary. Color coordinator Michio Yoshida said that this was done to give the film a softer feel. Yoshida said that this technique had never been used in an anime before Grave of the Fireflies, quote, and it was done on a challenge. Yoshida explained that brown is more difficult to use than black because it does not contrast as well as black. Some critics in the West have viewed Grave of the Fireflies as an anti-war film due to the graphic and emotional depiction of the pernicious repercussions of war on a society and the individuals therein. However, director Takahata repeatedly denied that the film was an anti-war film. In his words, it, quote, is not at all an anti-war anime and contains absolutely no such message. Very bad for the series. Instead, Takahata had intended to convey an image of the brother and sister living a failed life due to isolation from society and evoke sympathy, particularly in people in their teens and 20s. Following the success of Grave of the Fireflies, Takahata drew up an outline for a follow-up film based on similar themes, but set in 1939 at the start of the Second World War. This film was called Border 1939, based on the novel The Border by Shin Shikata. And would have told the story of a Japanese teenager from colonial Seoul joining an anti-Japanese resistance group in Mongolia. The film was intended as an indictment of Japanese imperialist sentiment, which is briefly touched upon in Grave of the Fireflies. Although Takahata finished a full outline, which is republished in his book, Thoughts While Making Movies, the film was canceled before production could start due to the 1989 Tiananmen Square protest. Public opinion in Japan had turned against China, and Ghibli's distributor felt a film partly set there would be too risky. In 2019, the New York Times called it one of the most startling and moving animated films ever. In 2000, Roger Ebert said that it was an emotional experience so powerful that it forces a rethinking of animation. On that note, let's talk a little bit about Grave of the Fireflies. Who wants to start?
Should we talk about our histories with this movie? Like, Zach, when did you first see this movie? How long has it been since you've watched it?
This is the third time I've watched it. I think I watched it. I want to say I watched it in college or right outside of college, just because it has a lot of it has a lot attached to it, because and it's an unfortunate thing. And this is one topic that I would like to talk about in this, is that it's a very good movie. It's a great movie, fantastic movie, but it also has this label to it where it's just like, watch this, it's fucking depressing, and you're just like, and so I think that's where I was first introduced to it, because it was like, do you like Ghibli? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, watch this one, it's fucking depressing. And so I got enough out of it. I was depressed after it. But I think it was the second time, and then watching it for this third time, you really catch like the small nuances. This third time, I really enjoyed the moments in the notes that I mentioned, like the kind of enjoying their days, like those small moments where they're having like little pockets of joy that just kind of allow them to move on, whether it's at the beach or when they're playing games or things like that, or when they have the fruit drops and stuff like that, where it's very small. It's a very, it's not necessarily a substantial moment for moving the plot, but for these characters, just to kind of give them breathing room, and they give us breathing room. They're really nice. And so, this is my third time watching it. And I don't know, like, again, like I just, it is very sad. And like, I think that's something that you reckon with while you're watching it. But I also think it was labeled as like, just watch this sad thing because it's, as
like an endurance test or something.
Exactly. And and I feel like that's just a disservice to the movie. What about you?
I'm impressed that you've watched it 3 times. I feel like it's a movie that's difficult to go back to once you've sat through it once.
I got problems.
Michael O'Malley insisted or refused to be on this episode because it's a movie that he never wants to watch again. He's seen it one time. I saw it like you in college when I was just kind of inhaling Ghibli movies. And then I saw it for the second time just a couple of weeks ago with a Japanese cinema club that I helped run at my school. Because the kids voted on this movie. I was shocked that this was the one that they wanted to watch out of all the Takahata films, but they were up for that, I suppose. And it was an interesting experience to kind of hear a room full of teenagers sniffling for, the runtime of this movie. And I chose to be on this episode just because I happened to have watched it pretty recently. So I didn't rewatch it again today or this week, but I watched it 2 or so weeks ago. So I'm not going to be super sharp on all the details, but the emotional heft of the movie is definitely still with me.
Yeah, and I mean, how did the students? I mean, other than just sniffling, like did the students like the text of it, like what the movie's
Oh
trying to
yeah, I
convey?
mean, I think that they really loved it and were really moved by it. Like the conversation we had afterwards had a lot to do with like um, the kinds of people affected by war that we usually don't see depicted on film, and like the criminalization of homelessness and like food scarcity and stuff like that. Like they really picked up on a lot of the like the socio-political themes of it, and we also kind of talked about like the difficulty that there must have, like how difficult it must have been to actually sit down and make this movie, because it's one thing to watch it, but to kind of like devote yourself to crafting these beautifully constructed images for like years and years and years seems like it would be a grueling process.
Yeah. Jessica, what about you?
So I've never seen this before. I watched it for the first time yesterday, and kind of like what Zach was talking about. In college, I was made aware of the movie and was like, "I'm not watching this," and for like the opposite reason, because like Zach was like, "Oh, this is a sad movie. I want to watch it," and I was like, "This is a sad movie. I don't want to watch it."
Yeah.
and it's but it was like a weird barrier for me, because Takahata is like, I like Takahata movies more than I like Miyazaki movies as a whole. Like I think there are
Hot
lots
take
of
here, guys.
there are
Very hot
lots
take.
of there are lots of his films that I think just hit like so much harder than Miyazaki movies. Like
Scorching.
Princess Kaguya is a perfect film. Like
It's incredible.
absolutely
Yeah.
5-star, perfect movie. I love it above all Ghibli films. And so it was a barrier for me, because I've seen Pompoko, I've seen Princess Kaguya, I've seen Only Yesterday,
I like that
and
one. I think that one's super underrated.
Only Yesterday is amazing. It is very good. And so this was a movie that I was like, I want to complete. Like, I need to watch The Neighbor,
My Neighbors,
Neighbor
the Yamadas. Yeah.
Yeah,
That
I
one's
need to
okay.
watch that one too. But I was like, I need to complete my Takahata films, but this is always a barrier for me, because I was like, it's really hard to get yourself in the mood to watch a sad movie. To me, it is. Like, I don't want to have a stressful week and then sit down and like watch a movie that's going to bring me down. And specifically the last year and the last 2 years have been very hard for everyone, I think. And so it never seemed like a good time, and it never seemed like the right time. And when this movie was proposed for Cinematary, I was like, I need to challenge myself to just do it. I was like, this is my opportunity to just get it over with, and I can say that I've done it. And I regret that decision, because it's just I don't regret it. It's just like
It's a movie everybody should watch at least once.
Yeah, I think it's important. I think that what the movie is saying is extremely important. And I think that aspect of it is worth it. Like this is something that actually happened, and there are children that were just like them that it actually happened to. And so
Takahata lived through this.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and it's based off of a short story that the boy like actually lived this. And so I think that their story is important, and the pain that we feel and the sympathy that we feel for them, like it's all real emotion that, you just have to face it. And I like I watched the movie and then cried for 2 hours like after the movie, and was like trying to like fold laundry and eat dinner and do regular things, and then images of the movie would pop back up and I would just start crying again.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh my god, I felt so emotional of like, why can't I stop thinking about this? And and then I thought, like, maybe that's good, like maybe that's a good thing that I'm thinking about it. And it kind of like hit a very personal place for me, because my mom grew up in the Philippines, And when she was 2, her mom died, and she was one of 5 siblings, and so they were very poor. And my mom had to sell food on the side of the road and do laundry for people to get money for their family so they could afford rice and fish and things like that. And my mom tells me, like, she remembers when she was a child that she was hungry a lot of the time. And that, knowing that feeling of like being hungry and not being able to do anything about it is
Mhm.
awful. Like, I don't think that anyone deserves to be hungry. Food is a basic right that everyone deserves to have no matter what. And just like growing up, food was never to be wasted in my home. Like, my mom was always like, we share our food with everyone always. And I think it's something that like stuck with her. But the consequences of her being malnutrition when she was a child is that she has like receding gums now. And so for years she just has to get injections in her gums so that she doesn't lose her teeth. And that is another thing. Like, I don't think that people understand how important food security is. Like, there
Mhm.
are people right now in America who are starving, like who do not have enough food. And specifically, like in this movie, they show like how important nutrition is for a child and how it impacts their growth and like what is going on with their body. And that was like a
Mhm.
thing in the, like, you slowly watch this child like deteriorate.
Yeah.
And it's that, I mean, that's why it's so sad. It's just like, the solution is food, but they
Right.
can't get it. They can't get
Yeah.
that food. And by the time he does get the food for her, it's too late. And
Yeah.
that is like,
Well,
it's so
you have
sad.
that scene where where he takes her to the doctor, and the doctor's like looking at her, and the doctor's just like, she needs food. And then
Yeah.
like, like they kind of wait a second, and then he just goes, where the pretty much where the hell is the food?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
like he just
Can't
like yells at him.
prescribe it.
You can't prescribe, like, well, where is the food? Nobody has food. So
And also, like, you get these shots. The doctor's office is one of those shots where they have to take the girl's shirt off to, like take her heart rate and stuff like that. And like you can just see her ribs through her back. And it's like it's that really intricate Ghibli illustration style that's usually used for such like the purposes of like creating such beauty that is like create something like really horrific here and balances that with these moments of levity that you talked about, Zach.
Mhm.
Like on one level, those moments of levity give the movie room to breathe, but they also kind of make the tragedy hit harder. Like if this was just a movie about bad thing after bad thing after bad thing happening to these kids, which it kind of is that, I think it might have a little bit less power than if we didn't also see those kids happy at
Mhm.
points, right? Like
well,
we're kind of being able to recognize what's being lost.
well, that and it's also reminding you, and I think this is what Takahata is trying to get across, is that these are kids having to do this.
Yeah.
It's if this was a 25-year-old and a 30-year-old, it would probably just be hit after hit after hit after hit because
Mm-hmm.
but you kind of have like and this is one of the things that also kind of drew me in about the movie the first time is um I mentioned the Ebert review, but it's a movie that people always kind of talk about when it comes to like pushing the boundaries of animation. Like
Yeah.
this is a movie that could easily have been a live action movie. So like why was it
Mm-hmm.
animated? And it's because you get those kind of magical realism moments. You think about like the opening of this movie and it just kind of it immediately tosses you. It does not even like mess around. It immediately tosses you in. And then but it opens up into that kind of dream sequence where
Mm-hmm.
you have him and he's reunited with the sister and you have the fireflies everywhere and it's just like this really magical beautiful like Ghibli moment, but
Mm-hmm.
it's also kind of sandwiched between these kind of horrific this immediate horrific thing that you see. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that that's kind of the reason why you have animation, because it challenges you to kind of you're gonna be sympathetic already because of just the story, but it also kind of gives you, I think, a little bit more clarity. Like I think it kind of it offers this clarity to the whole situation because it offers these kind of magical moments to kind of remind you again what is being lost.
I love the color palette of that sequence you're describing, Zach, at the beginning when we're kind of
Yeah,
like
it's like
going through the afterlife or
yeah.
like looking at the world from the perspective of a ghost or something like that. It has like this really beautiful deep red to it that's like just off enough from what that train actually looks like to let you know that we are in some sort of supernatural space.
And I really like the interpretation of the afterlife in this movie because there's something really, especially once it's even more moving like if you watch the movie again and you know like what happens over the course of it.
That's why it's hard to go back to because
Exactly.
like the light moments don't feel light.
Exactly. But then at the same, but again, like I said, this is the third time I've seen it, and the light moments are even they're just wonderful. Like that beach sequence, the sequence when he gives her the fruit drops the first time, just those kinds of those just super small moments. Like it's just, you know, it's just it's all they have, you know. It's all they're really offered, and it's just kind of it's beautiful in the fact that they're only given this small amount of time to do that, and they accomplish that. And so you know, while it's a movie about people saying that they're not accomplishing anything because they're unable to get the food, they're unable to get shelter and that kind of stuff, it's like, yeah, but they're able to capture these small moments of joy in this just bleak outlook of world.
Yeah, what can you say about Grave of the Fireflies, really, right? Like, I don't know where to go from here in this conversation other than like we could just list off all the saddest things in the movie if we
Well,
wanted
and
to. The scene where the girl eats a rock is like the saddest thing I've ever seen.
that is, but at the same, like that's what I was talking about at the beginning, though. Like I think it gets this label of just being the sad endurance test, and I think and I don't know what you all think, but I just find that to be incredibly unfair to this movie, which is because I think also just on its own, it's a really fucking good movie, and that's why we reacted to it because it's really good at being a movie, and I think it's unfair to kind of just be like, well, watch this, it's super sad, see if you can survive it, you know. That's all. That just seems disingenuous to me.
Yeah, I still think that there is like a sort of sense of hope in the movie. Like I think including those moments like Zach talked about and also like the afterlife scenes, like I think that it adds this sort of sense of hope where I think that like Takahata himself like does believe in an afterlife and that he is saying that even though these kids had no hope, like in real life they do when they die. And that sort of that sort of like peace kind of washes over you like as the credits roll and you're like you feel like you've been kind of like punched in the chest and then you're like okay, well they're free now. Like it's like they don't have to worry about it anymore. And I don't know. Like I think that and I think that Takahata is like really good about doing that. Like I would argue that his movies feel like more like real life to me than Miyazaki movies do. And it's like in Only Yesterday it's like a coming of age movie and like it parallels this woman's life in her 20s and when she is growing up, and there are like realities in the film that are conveyed that I'm like it doesn't feel like a majestical magical thing like Spirited Away does or like My Neighbor Totoro does. And so I think that's why I think he was like the perfect person to make something like this because like Andrew said, it does use the animation detail to show all of these things, but it's used to kind of show you the contrast between like this magical, peaceful existence and then the existence that comes with war. And Andrew also touched on this too of like the people that are being the people that are being shitted on the most are like the poor people, the people who couldn't afford to leave. They couldn't afford to leave their village and go stay somewhere else or go to some other country, and they had to stay and starve. And like I really liked the scene that was included where the girls are in their big dresses, and after the war is over, they come back home and they're like, "Oh, it looks so beautiful. We missed it so much." And their house is completely fine.
They put out a
Wasn't touched.
phonograph.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they got a phonograph and the record is playing, and it's like pans over and you just see like the hole that they've been living in and eating like dried frogs and just like trying to scrounge up whatever they can. And it's just such a like whiplash of like, okay,
Yeah.
you know, this is not everyone's experience. Like these are two different experiences happening in like the same area.
Right. And there's a lot of scenes of the kids noticing other kids being reunited with parents, and just the sinking feeling of like, well, I'm never going to have that experience again.
Right.
But to circle back to the point you made about the afterlife being kind of an escape for the characters in this movie, or a relief for the characters in this movie, it does remind me of Takahata's last movie, Princess Kaguya, which is kind of dealing with a similar, like not to the same scale, but it is also kind of a movie that feels like this large unfolding tragedy that just kind of gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And the only escape for it at the very end is like this supernatural, like literal Deus ex machina, where gods come and sweep her out of the earth. Right. Yeah. So, I mean, if you are a person who does believe in the afterlife, I could see that being very comforting. If you are not, it feels like, well, no hope in this world, you know?
And also, like, that sucks. You have to, because you also get moments where like them in the afterlife are watching what happened to them, you know, in their last days. And like, I wouldn't want to watch that. I'd be like, just send me to wherever.
I want to watch My Neighbor Totoro.
Yeah,
put on that part of the double feature.
Which I like in that double feature that they led with this one, and then they went.
Oh, they did.
Oh my gosh!
Yikes.
Like imagine just the like the just paddle to the face with this.
Well, there is some stuff in Totoro that's pretty subtly dark. I mean, the specter of death kind of hangs over Totoro because they're worried about their mom dying of a fatal illness, and there's a long stretch of that movie where they think that the younger of the two girls has been lost and died out in the wilderness or something. And like, I imagine watching that after Grave of the Fireflies would make like the sinking feeling of some of that stuff in Totoro way more intense.
Yeah. And you said subtly in there, and like I don't think that Takahata has like the subtleness in his. Like I think when you watch a Miyazaki movie, you know that like, yeah, everything's gonna be fine at the end.
Yeah.
And like not necessarily in a Takahata movie, like at all.
So was there, because I remember thinking about this the first time I saw it, did you all have any thoughts or anything that kind of stuck with you watching this, knowing that the people firebombing them were Americans?
Yeah, I mean, what else do you say but that?
Yeah,
you know, it kind of like makes you reflect or ponder like to what extent this is happening now to children in like the Middle East, for example, with drones. Like we have a little bit more distance from it now. Like we already had distance from it in the 1940s, and now it's even more. And like it's kind of hard to know as an American who attempts to stay informed, like, you know, how much information about, you know, large scale suffering of innocence is being kept from us, right? It is hard to watch this movie and ever feel a sense of patriotism or like any sort of like non-negative feeling towards the American military again. You know, it's just like feels like if we could allow this to happen, like that is kind of like an unconscionable, like unforgivable. This is an institution that has like just nothing but rot at its center. That is the feeling that I have watching it as an American.
Well, and this is just the firebombing that they were conducting. It wasn't even the nuclear weapons that they would eventually unleash, you know. So,
and this was part of like a large scale strategy of like tons and tons of towns across Japan. So like the scale of this movie, I think, is one of the more like powerful things about it. Like, let's not look at how a town was destroyed, but let's look at how one individual family is destroyed, and then you can kind of extrapolate from there, like how many people had this exact same story.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Jessica.
Oh, well, I was just gonna be a big bummer and be like, yeah, I like remember as a child. So like I'm Asian American, obviously, and my dad was in the Air Force, and so very like pro-military, of course. And I remember having a conversation with him when I was a kid of learning about the atomic bomb and how many Japanese people it killed, and reflecting on that as an Asian person and being like, so you're telling me that you support that decision? Like, it happened a while ago, but you're like saying that you supported that and that was good. And his reasoning, which is most Americans' reasoning of like, it was necessary. Like, it was either them or us.
No, that's a false dichotomy. Yeah.
Yeah, that just like sort of mentality was like my first thing of realizing like, okay, this is really, really bad.
Yeah.
And the things that they're teaching us in school are not necessarily like 100% the truth, because I had a lot of history teachers who were trying to sway it as like this was a necessary thing, and don't think about all of the people that were killed. Think about all of the Americans that were killed. And yeah, it's crazy.
And that's what, going to kind of Andrew's point, what's effective about the movie is that it focuses on the people, you know, like it's complicated because the Japanese government, not great. Like they also not great.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
You know, and so it's like American, not great. Japan, not great. And so, you know, while the war should just be a pissing contest between these two fucking governments, they should just kill each other. Instead, this stuff like this happens, and it's affecting these real people in this town that have no fucking, you know, they don't have any.
And you know, speaking of the American or the Japanese government also not being great, like the boys in this movie, the boy's relationship to the Japanese military and like his own sense of patriotism is really interesting, because Japan eventually surrenders the war, and he's like, what? The great Japanese Empire surrendered the war? There's no way. And he's kind of in a position similar to like your family, Jessica, where like his father is in the military as this is all happening, and like he's not really being given any sort of information that is that might lead him to be critical of his own government, or even like let him be informed of the kinds of things that his own government is doing that would kind of like lead to a response like this. Not that like those two things are inevitable or whatever, but I guess my point is that like oh gosh, what is my point? I forgot it. I lost it. Oh, it's gone. My point was that like this movie does a really good job at kind of encouraging the viewer to make a distinction between the actions of government and the lives of the citizens who live under that government, right? The Japanese government was doing some really fucked up shit. These kids had nothing to do with that, right? And in the same way, the American government did a lot of fucked up shit, including the shit that we see in this movie. But, you know, American kids and like the vast majority of American families had nothing to do with that. So like these are all kind of like levers being pulled by extremely powerful people, some of which we'll talk about next week when we talk about Dr. Strangelove. That like have these unfathomably, awful effects on unrelated people's personal lives.
Well, and the thing that's also you have to grapple with as an American is, so like in World War II, the Germans are bombing Britain, like in London. They're bombing London. We're bombing, German cities. We're bombing Japanese cities. But it's not like anybody was coming to America and like bombing Chicago or bombing New York.
Right.
There
Yeah.
were, and so
Pearl
going back,
Harbor was a military base.
it was a military base, and
Yeah.
there were families there who,
Yeah.
they were, the wives and the wife and kids were they
Yeah.
had no skin in this game. But
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, like we like there's something, at least to me, that's much more unconscionable about just you're bombing these cities that have nothing to do with anything just to bomb them.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's, I think that going back to the whole distance thing that we talked about at the beginning, like there's just this distance as an American, because that's why something like 9/11 was such a eye opener for so many people, because
Right.
if something finally came over to our soil, and so there, watching this as well, like I just don't think I just think it's tough for Americans to process what it would be like as well, to just kind of have, if a hurricane hits or tornado hits or something like natural hits, you might lose your house and that kind of stuff. But I don't think there's anybody in America would be used to having a firebomb raid on their town that completely wipes everything out,
Right. Yeah.
So,
And that totally skews America writ large's like feelings on war and foreign policy too, right? Because we've never borne the brunt of that
yeah.
directly. So it's like this abstraction that we can kind of rationalize away by saying, "Oh, it's for the greater good" or whatever.
The greater good.
Yeah.
And like the other thing that is also just so sad about this movie is that like nobody would help them, and
Yeah.
there were so many kids that were hungry and without food, and that their parents were gone, that these other adults were just trying to survive, and they were like, well, I can't give rice to you because I have to save it for my family. And the aunt was like really a big example of her just being like a huge douchebag, like unbelievably awful. And
That's being kind. A douchebag's a kind term for what she is,
what? Okay, yeah, I'm not gonna say the C word.
No, but still, douchebag is a kind term. That woman is, the woman's the worst.
I mean, yeah, she was awful. But I just think about like during wartime, it's kind of like everyone fighting for survival. It's every man for himself, even children. Like children don't matter, children don't count, and they're the ones who end up suffering the most. And like at the end, at the train station, well, I guess it's at the beginning because we don't go back to that at the end, I guess.
We don't.
But yeah, at the beginning, like you see all of these other kids' bodies, like they're all there too. It's not just him, and they've all just wandered out there to die, and it's just so bad. It's so bad, and it's just like just nobody, just there's nobody to help them, and that helplessness, like in the movie, is just so heartbreaking. Like I think about today, like if a child just came up to me and was like so hungry, like I would buy them as much food as I could. Like I would like go find a place and just like get them as much food as possible. And it's just like unfathomable to us being in America in 2021 and thinking about kids being like that. But like I have specifically chosen like food security volunteer opportunities because I know that it exists in America. And I've like volunteered at a food bank in Maryville, and I can't tell you like how many times I would have like kids with no shoes that were like very dirty and torn clothes, just like asking me for like extra food
Yeah.
to put into their hands. And so just the idea of these kids just not having any help is just awful.
This is, a big thing that schools do. Like, one reason schools are open is to offer food to kids who don't have it at home, right? Breakfast and lunch now. And like pretty much every school has some sort of program where like food is sent home with certain kids over the weekend who don't have it at home. Like there is somebody whose job it is to help arrange all that stuff because it is way more widespread of a problem than people think it is.
Mm-hmm.
It is, and if we took just a quarter of the military spending that we do, which is, we spend about $4 to $6 trillion on the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. If we took a quarter of that, just a quarter of that, we could end all of this. Thanks, America.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
We could be less unconscionably evil and feed people.
We could, but
that
no.
seems like a win-win. Yeah.
Let's just continue to drone strike. Thanks, Obama.
Well, if anyone was unclear about the political leanings of this podcast before this episode, here we are. Get out if any of that seems objectionable to you.
If you don't like that, fuck off.
I said no jokes.
Oh, I'm not joking.
I'm not either. I'm full Logan Roy going, fuck off. Yeah. Well, Grave of the Fireflies again, like as in kind of wrapping it up, like I think it's an important movie that people should at least watch once. You don't have to be like a sadist like I am and watch it 3 times. Yeah. But I think you should at least watch it once. Because I think again, like 1, on just like a human level, it's a very human story that you should watch, but 2, on just like a animation cinematic level, like it's an incredible representation of what's animation can do.
Yeah, and the kinds of stories we are willing to tell in animation, because that's a very narrow definition in America. Yeah.
Yes. In my closing statement, I would like to say that I do think that like the positive thing that comes out of this movie is like our ability to be able to help others and to help those that are the most vulnerable, like in our society. Like there are lots of times where you're just walking around in whatever city that you live in, and like if a homeless person asks you for food, like stop and buy them food. Like it's not that difficult. Like I don't think that anyone should be hungry, and like if you have the time and the ability to help somebody, then you should. And yeah, that's my big takeaway from the movie.
Jessica says help people.
This is my PSA, please. Help other people.
In the arms of an angel.
my Enneagram is 2. I am the helper. So in case you didn't figure it out. Help people. Thank you. That is all. Goodbye, people listening.
Well, that'll wrap up this episode of Cinematary. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cinematary, on Twitter and Instagram at handle @Cinematary, and on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/Cinematary, where we list all the movies that we talked about in this episode. Head over to patreon.com/Cinematary if you'd like to support the podcast and in the future give us titles that hopefully are less depressing. Thank you to Cam, Chad Newsom, Christina Daughtry, Corey Willingham, Harry Eskin, Candace Sisson, Ron Hayes, not Tyler Chandler, and Whitney Rowe Ross. Thank you so much for your patronage. I'm going to check on him. I swear to God. Like, he just had a child like 4 weeks ago. And I'm just like wondering why he watched this movie. And he I was literally like, what's a movie we should watch? And he went to this. And I was like, why? So I'm concerned about him. Next week, we're going to be continuing our Patreon pick anti-war series with 1964's Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb.
Precious bodily fluids.
Yeah. Also, the first Cinema Club movie that I saw for UT Cinema Club.
Same. We were at the same screen and didn't even see each other.
No, it was like what's that movie?
Serendipity.
Yeah, it's like serendipity.
I
There was
think
like
it's
a
like the
moment.
word serendipity. I don't
There
think
was
the
like a
movie
there's like a
coined
movie.
that.
No, there is
There's
a
a
movie
movie.
called
I'm
Serendipity.
aware
There is.
the concept wasn't created
You're
by
John
the movie.
Cusack. I'm Kate Beckinsale. And like we were at like a door.
Yeah, he
and,
did.
like,
John
we were at,
Cusack invented serendipity.
we were like at a door and we like touch it. Like, oh, excuse me, and that was what that it all triggered everything.
Man,
See, Jessica needed a good
Where it all
laugh at the end of
started.
this.
That
All
was
right.
good. That was good.
I thought so. All right. Until next week. Thank you guys for listening. We'll see you then.
bye. We did it, gang.